My grandfather, Lex Davison, short for Alexander, he won the Australian Grand Prix 4 times in the 1950s and 60s. And passed away in an accident in 1964, and left behind 7 children. And my dad was the second oldest at 16 years of age. And my father raced in the Tasman Formula 5000 series, so the cars that Mario Andretti raced in the 1970s. Brian Redman. Formula 5000 was the headline event at the Long Beach Grand Prix the first 2 years before F1 took it over. So, my father drove in, I think, 9 Australian Grand Prix before it, officially became part of the World Championship for F1 in the mid-80s. And then after my father retired from racing, he took over running a racetrack called Sandown that the Australian V8 supercars have a 500-kilometre endurance race at before going to Bathurst. So I grew up going to Sandown as a kid. Incidentally, Sandown was the circuit that my grandfather, my father's father, passed away at in a racing accident in the 60s. So it has a lot of value to our family. And it's where I won my first ever car race, my first pole position. It's huge. My cousin, Will Davison, that drives for one of the top V8 supercar teams, has won the Sandown 500. I was around Australian V8 supercars, around the roaring V8 engine that we all love. And, as a kid, it's pretty inspiring. But also I was going to F1 in my hometown of Melbourne in the late 90s, in the heyday again with, the V10s and also IndyCar was racing up at Surfers Paradise in the kart heyday. So again, turbocharged V8s, 950 horsepower. I mean, it was the best era and so inspiring as a kid. And as much as I loved F1, I absolutely loved watching kart in that heyday with Zanardi and Montoya. And just going to that event and how close you could get to the pit paddock area, the whole Americana in the paddock was so appealing and foreign to, an Australian kid. And it was incredible to see. And that very much inspired me to go chase the dream in America, where my father and I both wanted to be over Europe, and saw it was maybe a little more realistic to make it on limited financial resources compared to Europe. So, that's basically how it started in the 90s for me as a kid and going to these events. And I did do a year and a half of go-karts when I was 11 to 12 and a half. It was actually my mother that bought the go-karts and had her boyfriend mechanic them because my dad didn't want me to get involved. He knew how hard it was. Like I said, racing had killed his father. Obviously, very different era, but, things still happen, as we know. And, my dad was just very timid, also just not having millions and millions behind him. But I loved it. I wanted to do it so much. Fortunately, I showed I had some natural ability to, get it, run well off the bat. And, I stopped karting really from 12 to 17 because my dad just not force me, but just I had to focus on high school. I went to a private boys' school. We had to wear a collar and tie and suit coat. And it was pretty full on and very different to, how I guess the average kid grows up here. But I just was so passionate and definite about wanting to be a racing driver and playing all the PC games and, the IndyCar racing too, the papyrus thing with a, high pole page, and the NASCAR game as well. That NASCAR race in 2003, I think it was.
Oh yeah, and there's still a dedicated community to that to this day.
Yeah, going the wrong way on the super speedways and just wreck. Just going and spinning it in front of the whole pack, and all the stuff you did as a kid, and it was awesome. And at the same time, I saw Days of Thunder as a kid in the 90s, and that was all like pretty eye-opening to see what NASCAR was as a kid. And basically, open wheel racing was in my family history, so that's where I focused my energies. And essentially, as I got closer to IndyCar racing, that it was declining, when things were really starting to get tough. The manufacturers pulled out, the tobacco brands got banned, and NASCAR was gaining a huge amount of traction there in the 2000s. And the timing was just all really wrong for me to make it on the balance of probabilities with very little funding. But bottom line, I got a lot further than I could have ever dreamed with what financial resources we had. Finished runner-up in the Indy Lights Championship, drove for Tony George's team, Vision Racing. I kind of skipped a little bit, but I did Formula BMW, which was like the entry-level open-wheel series, and we raced at Montreal and Indianapolis with F1, along with a bunch of IndyCar races, and I won at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway as a teenager on the F1 weekend, which was pretty huge. And just got some good results, and finished second in the Indy Lights Championship. The global financial crisis hit, and then it was a really tough 4 years for me, really. I wasn't racing full-time. I was racing, on a wing and a prayer, but just drove whatever I could. I think I drove in the 2010 6 hours of Watkins Glen in Grand Am as a third driver in a DP. So Jimmy Johnson was a third driver as well, and was able to be competitive off the bat, up in the top three. But if you didn't have the funding, you weren't in the car the next week, and then you were just gone and forgotten. And, all these teams, they want to see that you can do it week in, week out before they're going to hire you. And that has been the biggest struggle of my career, is just never having that funding. So done many one-offs, did 2 road courses in IndyCar. I hadn't done Indy Lights for 4 years at that point. Just got like 2 weeks notice from Dale Coyne in 2013. Hey, I got the seat open. I can cut you a really good deal, which was still hard for me to put the funding together, but I did, and just put my heart and soul into it, and found myself out qualifying Graham Rahal and Joseph Newgarden in my first ever start, and wow. And beating them in the race. So it kind of just really made it clear to me that, like, if you just really put your heart and soul into it and you want it, that you can make some pretty cool things happen against the odds. Just getting that performance out of you. If you've got to do it tough and you have that fear of just having nothing to fall back on, you kind of go that extra mile. So that helped me basically get a start in the Indy 500 the next year, combined with a bit of luck. There weren't 33 cars for 2014's Indy 500. IndyCar had to financially help the last entry, and that was me. And, got into the race and finished in the top half of the field, so that was important. And then I picked up an IMSA gig as well at the same time. Just all of a sudden I thought, okay, I'm 27 years old. Why are things going to get better here? They've been tough the last 5 years, but then it just all started happening. I got a gig in a sports car and I made the most of that. And then I got a full season contract in IMSA and a contract with Nissan's factory team in GT World Challenge. And I found myself with 2 sports car contracts and doing the Indy 500 in 1 year. But then things change again, manufacturers pull out, and the gentleman drivers in IMSA, you know, realized that racing's the biggest waste of money on earth. And then I had nothing in sports car racing when I was top 3 in both series. And so you've just always got to be working hard to, you know, have something to fall back on. And, you know, as it's turned out, I've done 6 Indy 500s. 2 of them I've had great cars where I've been able to either lead the race or run in the top 10. The other 4, been forgettable, just really tough deals with, you know, doing one-offs and, you know, you just got all the odds stacked against you. But again, it's, you know, it's 6 more Indy 500s than most people can say and that I thought I was ever going to do. But in 2016, basically, I was watching the Xfinity race at Mid-Ohio in the rain, and I saw Andy Lally running up there in a very underfunded car. And I knew he couldn't be in that car at Road America in a couple of weeks' time because he had an IMSA race. And I thought, man, I've got to try get myself a start in this. Like, NASCAR is absolutely where I want to be. It's my kind of racing. I love the concept of just how simple it is and just giving the fans what they want and making it a show. I did a deal with Mario Goslin in the 90 car there in Xfinity. And, you know, you very quickly get a reality check about how gigantic the performance disparity is. It's the biggest in world motorsport, as kind of Parker Klingerman puts it. Qualified in the middle of the pack and just sent it on the starts and restarts, got up to 7th. And, you know, I'm feeling all good about myself, but then I had no brakes and then it all goes downhill. But got myself like on the TV and stuff. And then that helped me getting in conversation with Joe Gibbs Racing. And within the space of a year, I was driving for Joe Gibbs at Mid-Ohio and Road America the next year. And man, you know, you get in that good stuff. You don't drive one bit differently and you're at the front of the field, you know, winning the first stage of the race and doing it easier than you did to run 18th in the other car. So that was amazing. I got to work with Chris Gabehart, obviously Denny Hamlin's engineer. Very unlucky not to win at Road America. Ended up getting taken out in an incident that it was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But it certainly motivated me for more. And I returned with Joe Gibbs again the next year, and we were leading on the final restart and got turned around. So, you know, pretty much every race I did, I got biffed and barged and knocked off the track. But it got me a start in NASCAR. So when things started to get a bit tough with the Indy 500, like you may recall, my car burnt down after like 2 laps at the Indy 500 last year. And, you know, you put all your eggs in one basket. It's very expensive to do that race with limited sponsors you've got. And there was the opportunity to get a start in the Cup Series, essentially through Rick Ware. I ended up driving for Spire at Pocono last year simply because the alcoholic sponsor that I had Oil Fire Whiskey. It was kind of against Rick's desire to put alcohol on any of his race cars as much as he didn't want to turn the money away. So his sister team, Spire, at the time, I ended up driving for them. And I found myself going into the race having never driven a stock car on an oval, never driven Pocono, no practice, no qualifying, straight into the Cup Series and just taking the green flag. And, you know, a lot of people obviously thought I was crazy for doing it, but I just thought, man, I got nothing to lose here. This is absolutely bucket list to think I'm going to drive in the Cup Series with all these superstars. And you got to get a start somewhere. Obviously, I drove that 90 car in Xfinity, and then very shortly I was driving Joe Gibbs a lot sooner than I thought I would be. Different deal in Xfinity, but still a lot happened by just getting yourself on the radar. So, yeah, it went very well. Looked after the car, didn't put a scratch on the car in both races, finished ahead of a handful of guys that had been doing it a while. And then that motivated Rick, gave him, the confidence to put me in the car for another 13 races. And I could never have thought that in 2020 I'd have done 15 cup races and the Indy 500. It was incredible for how tough that year was for a lot of people, obviously. So, yeah, I had to, learn some tough lessons, obviously, right? I ended up brushing the wall at Daytona 400 and then cutting a tire and spinning it and putting it in the wall, and drove it back into the paddock and got out of the car and looked at it. And I'm just like, well, what do you expect? I'd never driven these cars before, and I'm 3 wide in the middle and up the top, and our cars are all trimmed out. I was just like, okay, I didn't write it off. It's not ideal, but okay, of course something was going to happen at some point in one of the races. So fortunately there weren't many incidents, but there was a couple. And as a result of that groundwork, we were able to do a deal with Rick to do 26 of the 36 weekends this year. I'm in slightly better equipment than I was last year. Definitely not much, but everything's kind of a little bit of a baby step, and things have gotten off to a good start this year. We scored the team's best road course result at Daytona with the 23rd, and their best short track result at Martinsville with the 22nd. And then, of course, the Pro Invitational iRacing Series has been huge for us underfunded guys to try show something with equal car performance. And, it's just been great to get my name out there for the no name that I am compared to all the other guys. So, yeah, just kind of slowly I'm seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. And, if kind of the equal performance things, anything to go by with the new car, it's certainly exciting for a lot of guys, in running at the back for 2022.